And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Pumpkin Copter cast, a good old podcast about video games. Today, I am joined by Brian Crick, the person behind upcoming space game Tinselfly.
Hey Tyler, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So, we'll start with the standard who you are and what you do in regards to the game.
Okay. Tinselfly is kind of something I'm working on in my free time. During the day, I am a Unity developer doing simulation, educational software type stuff for the Case Western Reserve University School of Nursing, where we do like research projects, things like that. And in my free time, I'm working on Tinselfly. So I basically live in Unity all day, every day, whether I'm at work or I'm not at work. I'm working in game stuff. So,
Okay. So, how did you discover video games?
ooh, that's a tough question. I always my memory's not so good. I have trouble remembering things like that, I'm afraid. Um, my family got its first computer when I was like, I don't know, 6 years old, 6 or 7 years old, which at the time was kind of rare for a family to have a home computer. But they got it for like accounting type stuff, and it had some video games on it. And it also came with a book on programming, so I started learning programming very, very early. Probably one of the first games I played was Scott Adams text adventure games. There was one called Mission Impossible, I think. One of those text-only games where you have a lot of
Really?
puzzles to solve. Yeah. And it just kind of went from there. So yeah, I went from there to like chunky dungeon crawls to arcade shooters, and just it never really stopped. And I don't really remember when it started either. So it's just kind of always been there.
Okay, so what would you say was your favorite game and or games growing up?
I liked when I was very little. I liked the original Legend of Zelda, as a lot of people did. I liked Ultima 5. Had a huge influence on like how I perceive video games. Um, and I just obsessed over that game like all through middle school. And making like little paper maps, like intricate paper maps that took like 4 sheets of paper on like 20 square per inch grid paper. It was insane. And I really loved that game. I loved in college. I liked Oddworld, that whole series of games. So like Abe's Exodus and Abe's Odyssey. Just the way you communicated in that game was really interesting. Um, and also, The Longest Journey is one of my favorites. It's a point and click adventure game kind of thing, kind of character driven.
Hmm. So, what made you want to get into game design? Was it something you felt like you always wanted to do, or was it like a recent discovery?
It's like I said, it's always kind of been in the background there. I never really set out to do like a career in game design, and in many ways I still don't, despite, having worked on TensorFly. Um, but it's one of those things where I look at video games, and it feels like a challenge. It's an interesting challenge. It's like, okay, we've got this medium, and some people are doing some really cool things with it, and I'm like, it's still kind of unexplored, and I wanna be a part of exploring that, and I want to see what I can do and what kind of unique things I can bring to the table here. And I think I might be in a position to do that. So it's just a kind of like recognizing that and kind of like just like running with it.
Okay. So now we can get into the meat and potatoes of this. So if you had like a booth at PAX or something like that, and someone walked up to it, what would be the rundown you give them as to what Tinselfly is?
Okay, so the elevator pitch, such as it is, Tinselfly is a very story and character-driven adventure game set in a whimsical science fantasy universe, where you follow the adventures of one Robin Etherspring. who has always dreamed of joining this like space navy. Um, and it's sort of a coming of age story where she realizes that this sort of dream that she has, that the reality does not really match, the cheesy adventure stories that she
Mm-hmm.
grows up on. Um, she grows up on these like sci-fi serials, which are a little like, like Star Trek or something like that, where people go on these grand adventures in outer space. And she actually does join crew, and it's about like accepting the mundanity of that and the beauty of the mundanity of this job that she has that happens to be in outer space.
Okay, so where did like the name of the game Tinselfly like originate from?
So in the game, a lot of character development will come in flashback. You'll see Robin as a kid growing up, and Robin grew up on a farm. So this farm that she grew up on is in the clouds on a gas giant. It's very kind of weird, kind of alien farm, and they raise what are called tinselflies. And tinselflies emit almost like monofilament wire from their bodies as a sort of defense mechanism when they're scared. So when they're scared, they shoot out this monofilament wire, kind of like spiders make silk, from their bodies. And it's like tangles up and cuts up any predators that might be chasing them. And so the humans in this universe harvest that wire, which they call the tinsel. That's why they're called tinsel flies. So they harvest the tinsel, and it goes to a refinery, and it's used in the production of starships in this universe. It's a very strong material. So just thematically, it's all about being a very small part of this very, very large industry of shipbuilding. It's like obviously the tinsel flies don't know what's going on. They're just like unwittingly, helping the humans make spaceships. And thematically, that's really important to the story. It's about, being very small and not really knowing how what you're doing is affecting what's around you.
Okay, so how did you come up with the various ideas that come together and make the game's plot? Does it come from like any specific thing, or was it just like
Kind of.
bits and pieces from all sorts of like books and movies and shows?
A lot of it is from books and movies and shows. A lot of it is based on some personal experiences I had when I was growing up. Um, so I'm gonna if I don't have a handle on my age yet, I'm gonna date myself here. So I grew up and there was no internet. And it only really became a thing when I got to college. So I started college in like 1995, when more and more people started to have internet access, and I never even heard of internet access until I got to college in 1995. So if you asked me when I was a kid what like my dream job would be, it would vary from day to day, from week to week. But frequently I would say I wanted to work for Industrial Light and Magic, the special effects company. Worked on lots of blockbuster movies, great special effects. And I'd say that's what I want to do. I want to work for Industrial Light and Magic. Um, so I get to college, and I suddenly have internet access, and you can suddenly browse these websites in different states and different countries and stuff like that, and just kind of poke around as this kind of novelty. And I
Mm-hmm.
stumble across a recruiting site for Industrial Light and Magic. It's just a simple, one sheet web page, which is just text. I don't think there were even any banner graphics on there. It's just like, hey, if you're interested in working for us, send us your resume. And it was just the weirdest thing for me, um, because I had this dream, and suddenly I had some means of attaining it. I mean, I realized at that point I didn't have the skills at all. I needed to get a job, with a special effects company. I wasn't really working towards that because I never saw that as something that was remotely attainable. And suddenly there it was in front of me. Um, and obviously I don't work for them. I never did. I never worked for a special effects company. But later on, I was talking to an old grade school friend. Um, and he actually he was offered an internship at ILM, and he turned them down, which really shocked me. But he said, yeah, he had, unlike me, been training all his life, to do this thing that we both kind of wanted to do as kids, except he had more of a handle on how to do it. And at this particular stage in his life, it just wasn't what he wanted to do. It was a very, mundane kind of thing. It was this very like grunt work kind of position that he would have been getting at ILM, and he didn't take it. He moved to somewhere else. And that kind of ties in with the themes of Tinselfly. Again, it's all about having this dream and kind of not knowing how to get there and not knowing what the reality version of that dream is. Like if you dream of being an adventurer in outer space, you can get in a job in this universe that's like that. But it's not really going to be, space adventures. It's going to be this more mundane, like survey, counting fish and making maps kind of version of that. So one of the parallels to the whole suddenly getting internet access in this universe at the opening of the game, these wormholes open and suddenly you can walk from planet to planet. So if you want to get a job on this planet on the other side of the solar system that you always wanted to visit, you can just do it, whether or not you're prepared to do it. So that was very long, but that's kind of where a lot of that came from.
Okay, so when the game is all set and ready to go, like how will it play, or what is the gameplay styles that you intend to put in it once it's all finished?
So a lot of it is, I think of it as sort of an evolution of your standard kind of point and click adventure games. So if you ever played games like The Longest Journey, which I mentioned earlier, or LucasArts adventure games, or things like that, or in many ways some Telltale games, that sort of thing, where you have you're playing a character, you walk around a world. There's no health bar or anything. You're just like in exploring and like talking to people and stuff like that. And click on objects and work with them, things like that. What I hope will make this game unique is I want to develop the characters and tell the story directly through the puzzle design and rely a little less heavily on like dialogue and cutscenes that you might get in this sort of game typically. So, for example, going back to the farm, like I mentioned earlier, you're playing this girl, and as a young girl, you'll learn that she has these dreams, like I mentioned, of going on these adventures. And the way that you'll learn that is through her doing her chores on the farm. So one of her chores is that she has to go into the habitat where the tinselflies are and run along behind them with this like cable spooler thing, and collect the tinsel that the tinselflies are emitting, so that they can harvest it. And if she doesn't run fast enough, the tension on the tinsel is all wrong and it breaks and she can't harvest it. So she has to keep pace with the tinselflies as they run around in circles in this giant donut on the farm. And she can't do it. If you just go and try it, it won't work. You won't be running fast enough. But what you'll find out is that if you go up into her room, she has a number of toys that you can pick up. There's a teddy bear. There's some posters, things. There's a toy spaceship that you can pick up, and as long as you are holding the toy spaceship, you'll run a little faster. You'll see, like, right on screen what the character is imagining. Like, she'll imagine, like, these other spaceships flying around, and they'll be kind of overlaid on screen. And you'll kind of see what's in her head. So as long as those imagined spaceships are on screen, as long as she's holding this toy, she'll run faster. So what you do is you play with the toy for a little while. You put it down, the imagined things linger a little bit, and you're still running fast, and then you can go do your chores. And then you're running faster, and you can keep pace with the tinselflies, and you can do your chores. And that's how you get through your day. On a day-to-day basis, this is what this character does, is that she gets through her kind of, ordinary life on the farm by just kind of getting lost in her imagination. So the idea is that you've learned all of that, every scrap of that, without any dialogue. It was all through the puzzle design and learning about the mechanics of the character, and I want this to be very mechanics driven in that sort of way.
Okay. So, we talked about this a bit when we were going on about the game's plot, but to get into this part specifically, like, why an outer space setting? And
Hmm. There are a lot of different reasons for that. One of them is just I like outer space settings. Just from an aesthetic point of view, I like things that look kind of modern and futuristic. Um, at the same time, I want things to be very intimate and small. So if this were like set on a planet or something, from a technical point of view, it simplifies things to have it in outer space in many ways because I'd have to model like I don't know, if you're in a mountainous area, I'd have to like make the mountains. If you're in a forest, I'd have to make the forest. There's all this landscape around you. But the way I have this structured right now is the majority of the game will take place in this floating city, and the floating city is completely self-contained. There's no mountains, there's no trees, there's no clouds. There's a planet in the distance, but the city's kind of in orbit of this planet. So it's this very kind of self-contained environment where I can tell the story that naturally has boundaries, so you don't have these weird artificial walls on it, and it really allows me to design the world in this very modular kind of way, where I don't have to think too much about how it fits into the environment. It's just if I need more city, I just add more parts to the floating city, and I can just do that, and it's really easy to do. So I like that. I like outer space because, again, going back to the themes of smallness, it's easy to feel very small when you have these scenes set in deep space and there's literally nothing around you. I think that's most of it.
okay. And so, do you have currently have an estimated date or time frame of when this game will be fully released?
We're hoping for early 2020, like first quarter of 2020. So it's at least another year. So we've got a while to go.
Okay. And so, what platforms do you hope to put the game on once it's fully released?
Hopefully, well, we're doing PC and Mac, definitely, and hopefully all the major consoles. So it's not really a tablet or phone kind of thing. It's more of a console kind of thing, probably.
Okay. And yep, it's time for my favorite question, which everyone who's ever been on the show always understands perfectly, and there's never any room for any misinterpretation of any kind. So, in your opinion, is video games?
Okay. Is video games? Is there? It sounds like a yes or no question. Yes. The question kind of reminds me of a poem that I once saw. I've been working on Tinselfly a very, very, very long time. There are plot points that I wrote in like 2000 that are still there. Anyway, the game has gone through several name changes in those years. And at one point, it was called Alexandra Is. There's this poem by John Ashbery called "The Cathedral Is," and your question makes me think of that poem. Is video games? So there's this poem, "The Cathedral Is," and the poem goes like this: "Slated for demolition." That's the whole poem. So you've got this title, "The Cathedral Is," and the body of the poem is slated for demolition. And I always liked that poem. I read that in high school, and your question just made me think of that. Because it's a statement about it's an interesting poem because if you look at it, if you look at the title, the cathedral is, it's like, okay, what is the cathedral? You immediately start asking. And it kind of pulls that out from under you and says, oh, this is going away. It makes you think this thing is going to last, and it's not. So when you ask, is video games, that's what I think of. Is it's kind of setting up this, what is this? Is this going to last? What is it going to turn into? It's a very open kind of question. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, they're around. They're going to stay around. I don't know what form, though. So I guess we'll see.
Okay. And before we wrap it up, I know right now you're putting your game making energies into Tinselfly, but are there any other like genres of games you'd be interested in experimenting with somewhere down the road?
There's a lot of things I might want to try just to try it. I've always wanted to do a horror game. I don't know why, but it just sounds like it could be interesting and different. Um, I always wanted to try like a more space simulator kind of thing. The sort of thing where you have a spaceship and you fly around from planet to planet and, like, I don't know, trade or get in space battles or something like that. There's a couple projects I have backburnered right now. One of them is kind of that sort of thing, where you fly around in a spaceship. Um, I always wanted to make something in kind of like a cute tile-based, kind of open world kind of thing, kind of like the original Legend of Zelda. So there's a lot of different things I might possibly try. It just depends on, like, if I can find a good story, I guess, for it.
Okay. And that brings us to the end of this particular episode of the Pumpkin Copter Cast. I would like to thank Brian Crick for joining me.
Thank you.
Yep, be sure to keep an eye on the Tinselfly as the months and year roll on. There'll be a link to it in the description, and yeah, is there any social medias or things like that you wish to plug?
Sure. So on Twitter, I've got Tinselfly. I'm also, my personal account is Oogby, Oogby, where I do most of my posting on Twitter. There's also my publisher, Whitethorn. What? Actually, I don't know off the top of my head. Um, I'm trying to find it here. Just a moment. That's what I thought. Okay, so my publisher is called Whitethorn Digital, but the Twitter handle is in fact Whitethorn Games. So they're the publisher I'm working with, who have been wonderful, and have been getting me moving this along, after years and years of, just kind of puttering around with it. So,
Okay, so yeah, if any of the -7 people listening to this have enjoyed it, feel free to like and subscribe. On the rare occasions I post anything worth paying attention to, you can follow me on the Twitters at tgorman83. And yeah, this has been the Pumpkin Coptercast, and we hope to see you again next time.